Te Awa. No, Denmark means Scotland, Ave, Koe David Oji. During my presentation, some groups have a refusal to put numbers on this. How many of you are in accounting? I just want to show of hands. Okay, come on. You are numbers people. I did this to make you feel comfortable. Putting numbers on things is your business. That's what you do. Okay. I'm a qualitative person, a storyteller, so. All right. Now, what I want you to think about during the event is what you might do to reduce the big numbered ones, like Trump. What are you going to do to reduce the probability that Trump is going to cause an extinction event of the whole human race, so, along with all ecology? Oh, and there's no more love.
But that's what you need more of.
Oh, you need more of love. Well, why doesn't it have
No, we're us, yeah, but
That's the question.
Okay, got you. All right, I'm going to move along. So, thank you. But what I'd like to do is, we're using this as an exercise in an undergraduate class, and they're actually going to write an essay based on this, and they'd like to use you as the judges, you know, the expert people of Victoria, you know, so they have something. And where's the beehive? Is it around here?
That way.
Oh, that way. Okay, and then we want to deliver the results to your Prime Minister. Well, I'll be out of the country by then. All right. Now, how do you define sustainability? Let's have you talk about that a little bit. What is it that you're sustaining from extinction? And for how long? What's your time horizon? Like I did your grandchildren's life. In Native American communities, a lot of it is the 7th generation, right? What's your time horizon? And whose interest are we sustaining what? Is it in corporate interest? Is society's interest? Is it in indigenous interest? Whose interest? Family interest? And this is, of course, from Marcus Milne, a very excellent critical accounting scholar that has been having me read all of his work. There's a lot of it. And it's all delicious. So let's just take a couple of minutes and talk amongst yourself. What does this mean, sustainability? Does it mean anything in the corporate world in particular? What are we sustaining, how long, and in whose interest? Okay? So we're going to take a shorter amount of time this time. Ready, set, go. So Professor Milne is raising these 4 questions because we don't normally actually work out the definitions of what sustainability is. And what I'm going to go through in the presentation is one of the common consultancy definitions. And we don't really pin down what it is we're sustaining, much less how to measure it or for what the time horizon is, you know. So you get annual reports or quarterly reports, and it's put in accounting terms. You're an accounting audience, so you understand this. And then whose interests are we measuring these things, if they're measured at all? So I'm going to jump into the presentation now, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
And we'll come back to some of your ideas. I hope I got you to start thinking. Now, we're going to watch a short video, and you can find 20 of these on YouTube. And then this one is better than most of them. But what I want you to do is deconstruct what they're saying about triple bottom line here and some of the questionable assumptions that you think they're making. I see half a dozen questionable assumptions. You're a smarter audience than I am, so you're going to come up with at least 10. But look at this with a critical accounting or critical management, critical auditing point of view, okay? That's where sustainability is. It's not here, it's not there, only in the intersection of the 3 circles. I mean, alarms are going off in my head. Okay. Now, the next, roll it a little more, I'll articulate. And we got measurables here on the profit side, the people side, the ecology. We're measuring certain things, triple bottom line. Whatever you say. And look at here, money isn't more important than people and environment. Although the way he's drawn it here, it definitely is. So it kind of contradicts what he's saying, I think. He's going, Would you trade a tree and 2 people for 4 bags of money? Yes, you would. Yes. Okay. And now he's saying the earth works in a seasonal system, a cycle of nature, powered by volcanoes and depletions. He doesn't say that, I'm adding that. Nothing is created, nothing disappears, everything is only transformed. And you have a principle of entropy, where things dissipate, heat equalizes. Photosynthesis, entropy, the ghost. That's enough, we'll cut it there. Kill it. Thank you. Otherwise it'll play again, right? It'll be like, never mind. So, did you see any questionable assumptions about this triple bottom line right off the get-go? What did you see? What are, be critical, Just, what do you see? Yes?
Monetarization.
What is it?
Converting things into purely monetary values.
Yeah, converting things of the environment, of people, into purely monetary values. How hard is that? Can we actually do that? Can we actually measure these things? Yes? You just scratching your head? Yep. That counts as a comment.
Confused already.
Okay. The problem today is, can New Zealand become the first place in the world where budget is not the umbrella of quantitative economic measures like gross domestic product, GDP? Your Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is making a policy change for budget 2019. I read it on the way over here in the flight. I'm going, wow, I'm in the right country. She's actually going to make a change, and she wants to change the measure of GDP and revalue the goods and services in different ways. That's her objective. And she wants to include people's well-being in a holistic measure of success, a new living standard framework, and why I call this a counter-narrative to the narrative of economic triple bottom line. So it's a counter-narrative to what you usually hear about globalization and ranking countries by GDP, as if that's all that mattered. Now, this is how you normally see it drawn as a pyramid, and profit is always on the top. As a deconstructionist, when something's always on the top, I want to flip it, I want to deconstruct it and put it together in a new way. That's what we're going to do here. You also see this diagram called the Sustainable Development Matrix. And it sounds great. I mean, it's ideal. You're going to care about energy flows and model nature, and human and nature are going to coexist on the planet. Hasn't happened yet since the Western civilization took over, but be optimistic. People sharing knowledge, accepting responsibility, quality of life. You hear this over and over again in management circles. And then profit, creating value, recognizing interdependencies, and eliminating waste. Not happening, in my opinion. Okay. What I want to do is draw this picture again first. I'm going to draw it several times. But I'm going to expand profit to be what it really is. It's taking up the whole triangle, pretty much. There's a little bit left over here for people. There's a little bit left over for planet. So we could redraw it, have the greedy tycoon here from the 1920s, 1930s, when they killed the economy that time. So the core drivers, greed, growth mania, and growth scale. Shoemaker, 1973, Small is Beautiful book, excellent book by an economist who wanted to say, hey, there's too much greed, we're trying to grow, and the scale is crazy. We can't keep up as people or as planet with the scale of corporate behavior now. There's some 40 corporations that are bigger in GDP than New Zealand. And I counted them up the other day. Some lists that they have. Okay. So very vicious spirals of waste that was mentioned in the video, but there's also degradation, depletion, exploitation, poverty, corruption, deprivation, increasing inequalities. I got another presentation I do where it shows the 1%, and as you know, there's, I think, 8 billionaires have most of the wealth of the whole planet right now, 8 people, and their corporations, of course, and their estates and their lifestyle. And they're responsible for the majority of the CO2 use proliferation on the planet. So we're actually pointing the wrong direction. Now, if you look at corporate behavior, like Apple Computer, this is how in their corporate social responsibility, sustainability report, they report their profit for iPhones went from 53.4 billion, dropped in 2017 to 52.6 billion. I'm just crying about it. I just feel really bad that they're going to Central Africa and taking away the resources of those countries to make iPhones. I have an iPhone, so I'm really complicit in the whole thing. I also have a Mac computer. Okay, I shouldn't even be up here talking to it. It should just hang me right now. All right? Now they have measures of the planet, goes from 67 to 87, an environmental score. And I'm going to show you in a second how they calculate that score. You probably already know as auditors how they do this. And they have more calculations for people, labor and human relations score. How well are they doing? Went from 79 to 91, looking good. 79 to 87 on health. Now these are measures of their supply chain around the world, hundreds and hundreds of companies, and they're sending auditors out, audit them, but you got to really look at what it is that they're auditing and not auditing. So each firm in Apple's supply chain is rated on a 100-point scale based on its performance of their code of ethics. Now the code of conduct, code of ethics sounds really good, had a lot of good things, don't use child labor, don't exploit your workers, pay them on time. It's really good sounding things about the environment. But their walk and their talk are not the same thing. And as critical accounting people and auditors, we have to hold their feet to the fire. We have to really see, are they really doing things? Now, for administrative non-compliance, inadequate record keeping. Do I care? I care, but if their records are inadequate. As accountants, I'm sure you really care, but I more care that they're creating problems in other countries by their behavior, And, okay, are they documenting policy or procedure? Do they have a good training policy? Okay, good HR, human resource management stuff. By the way, why do we call it human resource management? What happened to people? All of a sudden it's human resource. I grew up, I'm older. I'm 70. I'm the oldest person in the room. Okay, maybe then you. You might be a little old. Okay, you're way older. You are the elder. You are the elder. I defer to your judgment. But it used to be called personnel. And it was about people. And personnel people represented the people. And they talked to management. But now, it's flip-flop, human resource management. People are objects, people are resources. Don't get me started on this. But are these the most important things to be measuring? Core violations. These are big time. Underage workers. there's expose after expose in Central Africa of children working in the mineral mines. You know, they have little fingers, they get into little spaces, there's cave-ins, there's cancer, there's whole villages decimated. The environment is safety threats. But they're only measuring what they're doing on their little survey. It's a questionnaire. It's like, what do you think of your safety in this company? Oh, it's real good. You know, that's not auditing. You know, it's not activity-based costing. It's not really getting into the nitty-gritty. Okay. Alvesson and Spicy, Max Alvesson of Sweden, calls this methodology functional stupidity. You know? And this is supposed to be the top of the line Apple computer for corporate social responsibility. If it's functional stupidity, not doing really good. There is widespread smuggling across borders in conflict mineral. Now they have a methodology in place to supposedly lock the bags, ticket the bags, trace the bags from the mines that are conflict free. Problem, everybody comes from, I'm going to use your cup, comes from another mine and dumps their minerals. I just messed up your coffee. You know, and says, oh, we're conflict free. And then another one comes from this mine, dumps it in, that's not certifying anything, and it's got slave labor in there, children. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but child labor for sure. And people whose lives are disrupted, decimated. And they should pay for the warlords' behavior. It should be like the tobacco industry where we said, okay, no more smoking, you caused all this cancer, pay for it, pay up now. But we're not doing that. We're doing little fudging measures in the auditing. And it keeps the conflict going and nobody's watching the smuggling, and that's from my new book. So, McDonald's reports on water use. This is McDonald's Corporation. Okay, I may admit, okay, don't raise your hand. You eat a Big Mac once in a while, you get in there for the fries, your kids go crazy. Dad, Mom, I gotta have a Big Mac. You know, really? Now, McDonald's reports water use of the fast food restaurant, but they don't talk about 600 gallons of water it takes to make each Big Mac in the fields, growing the food for the cows, right? What does it take to actually process that? They're not reporting large-scale pork-produced water pollution, hysteria-laden waters in the southeast U.S., causing lesions in fish and fish die-off. And I know fish are real important in New Zealand. So if you're eating a Big Mac, you're probably complicit in what's going on in the fish industry. Reports on energy. Not on the 10 calories of energy for every calorie good produced in an unsustainable food system. So this is from Hawken 2002, and again is from Marcus Milne. Marcus Milne is doing pioneering work in critical accounting to expose the simplicity, the stupidity of triple bottom line. And corporate social responsibility and sustainability. We're really concerned that sustainability has become greenwashing. Now, if you're sustaining, McDonald's requires a unsustainable formula. And it is cheap food, cheap non-unionized labor, deceptive advertising equals high profits. That's their formula. It's a very simple managerial formula that's used by McDonald's. We spent a lot of time writing about it, so is Professor Milne. Monsanto, farmers in India are committing suicide, not able to keep their farms, pay the fees from Monsanto if the Terminator seed gets swept into their field, or if they have agents selling seeds that don't tell them they're Terminator, etc. So their fields get polluted with these Terminator seeds. They then have to pay huge fees to Monsanto. They can't keep their farm. Farm is their life, family is a life, land is a life, and it's a disaster. So if you read, And I have students, they read Monsanto's reports, they watch those videos that Monsanto puts out, and they're going, oh, David, we need Monsanto to feed the world. We need genetically modified Terminator feed. We need to use Roundup to raise our vegetable garden in the back. I said, no, you don't. You don't need any of those things. The world doesn't need Monsanto. Take action alongside migrant farmers. I'm going to ask you never to eat a Wendy's hamburger again until they sign the Fair Food Agreement. I don't know if you know what that is, but I'm working in Florida with the Immokalee Coalition of Workers, CIW, Coalition of Immokalee Workers. For 23 years, they've been fighting modern-day slavery. I don't know if you know, but in the United States, we have slaves working in the agricultural field. I thought slaves was over with Lincoln. Turns out not to be true. Slavery was removed slowly. 50s civil rights movement, still happening. And in agriculture, to this day, it's happening in many parts of the United States. People are brought over by coyotes. That's somebody who's a slave handler who goes to another country, says, oh, you can get a job in construction, engineering. Oh, you're a doctor here. You can be a doctor in the United States. Get them into the country, whisk them off to the tomato picking farms, you know? Women raped. Women sexually abused. Wages shorted. Why eat at Wendy's when they're using tomatoes sourced by these slave production processes? When you can, McDonald's, bless their heart, signed on the Fair Food Agreement, Taco Bell signed it on, Subway signed on, 14 major corporations, including Walmart. You don't have Walmart. If you're thinking of letting Walmart into this country, don't. Their supply chains are terrible. Walmart, your supply chains are terrible. Sue me, you know? They bid the suppliers down. Suppliers often go out of business. This is documented. They move into a town. They say it's good for a small business. I teach small business. We have 4 Walmarts in our city with 200,000 people. 3 Walmarts and a Sam's Club. Why? They decided that Las Cruces, New Mexico would be the training ground for a Walmart. I'm sorry, but it just is not helping people, planet, and if that's the way you're going to earn profit, who needs that company? All right, so back here. They started doing actual worker-driven corporate social responsibility. That means the workers started rating this thing, not bringing in some audit firm that wasn't trained here at Victoria University, but trained somewhere else, that wasn't using good ethical, sound methodology, but was just producing these jokester kind of ratings of corporate social responsibility. Now the workers have their own radio station, they do their own training, they got a former judge, and they go into the fields, they work with the workers in their own languages, which are from Haiti, which are from Mexico, some Dominican Republic. They work with the different language groups, they do theater, they do things in their own cultural heritage to communicate what's going on. Workers get up to speed and they start reporting what's going on really. And then if Judge Laura says, hey, you guys are violating McDonald's or Taco Bell, whatever, Subway, then you can't buy from those growers until they clean up their act. So the growers have to clean up their act. And guess what, accountants? It's cheaper to eliminate the coyote slave trader and run a more efficient operation than it is to have that coyote middle person hurting the slaves and beating the slaves to do the work in the fields, you know? So even on an economic point of view, it's bad practice, right? Now Wendy's wants to maintain, their CEO says, well, we want the right to source our tomatoes what we want. We don't want to be told by a bunch of immigrants, farmers, what to do. So they're not playing ball. It's been about 3-4 years. I went to the demonstrations. I marched with migrant workers, you know? I believe in the cause. I've talked to the people. I think it's a valid movement that's spread up the whole East Coast. to many different kinds of fruit and vegetable crops, and I hope it spreads across the whole United States. Some countries in Europe are looking at the model of worker-driven corporate social responsibility. But it's the only one. None of the other CSRs run by corporations are doing the legitimate auditing work that they could be doing. Okay, enough on that. Women are rising in conservation. Democratic Republic of the Congo, women are standing up, in some cases, saying, you promised us schools, you promised us clean water, you promised us you were going to clean up your act. Now we want our farms back, we want fertile soil back, we want clean water that's not causing illness in our population, and they want schools for their kids that work. A China company went into Democratic Republic of the Congo, one of the mines from China, and promised the village, oh, we're going to build you a new school, we're going to build you new houses, we just want your land. Well, they took the land and they never got the school. They took the land and the houses they built were termite-infested clay. So the houses collapsed. You know, why can't a multi-billion-dollar mining company keep its word to the people? You know, that's, I don't know, I get kind of worked up. New Zealand is once proud of its farming heritage. Agriculture intensified, started spilling out into other sources of pride, like clean green image, etc. Now, if you look at New Zealand in the sheep industry, what's happening is a consolidation of the farms. And it's going the way of the United States. We're consolidating small farms into bigger and bigger farms. Now, sometimes that's a good thing. There's two Maori organizations that have formed co-ops of families, and they're in that too, and that's probably a good thing. But it means that the number of people that are going to make a living out of farming is going way down in New Zealand. You know, this is from your own statistics. And some people told me in the last presentation I did, oh, well, I know people in my class and they're going to start a sheep farm, they're going to borrow money and it's going to happen. Well, that's not what the trend shows historically. It's going to be harder and harder for the children of people in New Zealand to start the farms and have the traditional small farms and make it work. So at some point, big scale is not that workable. Here's my critique. Triple bottom line assumes all the measures are equal, all the bottom lines are equal. Well, they're not. They're not. Profit is very measurable, very traditionally measurable in classic accounting and economics, but the measures from planet and the sciences are very good. We could be using good, valid measures of science, but there's a lot of disinformation out there. In the United States, the Koch brothers spend millions of dollars, and so does Exxon, to convince Americans and Trump that there is no climate change. You know from reading your newspapers that the Alps are not getting the snow this year. That means the glacier caps are not being replenished. That means you just have the old dirty snow from the last few years, no new snow. That means you have less water flow through the rivers in New Zealand that come from those Alps, you know? So a student in another class in New Zealand said her parents didn't believe in climate change. It's not a belief, it's a science. You know, thousands of science has been done, many different methodologies validating the climate change. But in my classroom, I can get sanctioned if I don't say that climate change is a debate. I don't believe it's a debate. I was written up because I said it wasn't a debate. It's a science. Get over it. Would like to. Greenwashing narrative. In other words, it makes it sound as if it's for people and planet, but it's not. Then you have narrative exceptionalism. Humanity creates itself outside the natural limits of ecosystem and the belief that technology can solve any problem. So we did the extinction events. A lot of students believe that technology is going to come along and save them from the aliens or whatever the extinction event it is. triple bottom line, human-centric narrative. In Karen Barad's work, in critical feminist work, and social materiality, the post-humanist approach that all species matter, humans aren't the most important species. I know it goes against the Protestant ethic or whatever, but you know, when you do away with the other species, you're also doing away with the ability of the humans to survive as well, as we know from the bees. Many of you put pollination on there, right? What can you do? We have a new prime minister in New Zealand. She's making a policy change in budget 2019. She's talking about new ways to measure GDP, different ways, hopefully. She's talking about a more holistic measure. Let's give her one. Let's give her a more holistic measure. Let's talk about the real extinction events that are on the horizon. And we want New Zealand to be the first place in the world where our budget is not presented simply as an umbrella of pure economic measures. How many economists are in the room? None. Where the hell are the economists that are creating this bullshit? You know? No, they're not coming to this meeting. They're up on the top floor circulating with somebody or other. Not in this university. You have excellent economists, I'm sure. But they're not here, you know? Do they really want to hear this critique? Evidently not. They're firing at the whales seismic blasts in New Zealand seabed for oil every 10 seconds, 24 hours a day. It's destroying the hearing of the whales in the only habitat they have to come and congregate, you know? And it's going on. Why isn't the Ministry of the Environment saying, no, no, you cannot do your seismic blasts every 10 seconds and destroy one of God's, or forget God. Oh, okay, I'm in trouble there. Just, whales are important species, you know? Probably way more intelligent than humans, certainly better behaved. Now, we can take this ideal is not the real triple bottom line. I've spread it out for you. Now let's do something else. Look at the core driver. Experience of a low quality of life is what we get from triple bottom line. Quality of life and quality environment are deteriorating in the United States. Not just since the Trump election, but he had a lot to do with it. And then the manifestations, the global is fragility, fresh water reduction, climate change, ocean pollution, acidity, societal disruptions, not to mention job losses. Source, shift happiness, so how do we respond? I say flip the bottom line, put the economists in the drink at the bottom, put planet and people on top. Next, something is missing from the triple bottom line. Many things are missing. Now, this is some language that I'm glad. One of the saving possibilities is to pay more attention, as New Zealand is, to the Maori culture and philosophy, right? So, Mataonga, Maori, and I use IWOC, Indigenous Ways of Knowing. That's my abbreviation, Indigenous Ways of Knowing. My wife has a book on indigenous wisdom practices for business that they can learn from indigenous cultures. Wana Gatonga, I apologize for but I have to practice the Maori language to get it right. So I'm learning, get over it. Oh, you know how to do it?
It's fine, you go for it. I'm sure a lot of people are still learning.
Okay. But it means relationships of family, community, and ecology. So in the Native American in particular, it's about the relation to ecology, the community, the environment, the family structure, super important. You look at my busted up life in my family tree, you know, my dad divorced 3 times, I divorced once. I'm in a happy marriage now, wonderful marriage, 21 years, but took a long road to get there, but I hardly ever see my grandchildren. They're on one coast, I'm on another part of the country, I hardly ever see my grandchildren from my daughter. You know, it's It's not this, it's not right. People's multicultural equality becomes what is left over after profit, bottom line. You have a Maori term, rangat, tanga. I don't know how to say it exactly.
Rangatira-tanga.
Okay, that's what I said. So, and this is self-determination. When you take away a people's self-determination with their family, their culture, and their land, what have you got left? You know? And the driver for calculating worth of the planet without regard to spiritual ecology, Waratanga, spirituality.
Wairuatanga.
Correct. Very good. You got that language down. So in the Gregory Kahete comes to our annual conference. We have good conversations, dialogue with Native American community, and spiritual ecology is one of the terms he uses in the book. Native science. Westerners are not having a monopoly on science. There is such a thing as native science of learning from the ecology, the animals, the plants. My grandmother grew up, I was telling you, with her brother, married into a Native American family, married a princess. How great is that? Well, it was so great that when he was written out of the family Bible, nobody would ever speak to him again. That's how great it was in the white Western ways of knowing, right? But my grandmother knew every plant. She knew how to sustain herself and her family off the land. She knew how to live in harmony with the land, you know? And there was a spiritual ecology where every rock, mountain, sea, water, whatever, has a spirit. That's fundamental belief. Greenwashing, because time value of profit is short term. Kate Tak Kinkonga.
Kaitiakitanga.
Yours sounds better. Very good. And I appreciate your help on that. So if our time focus is quarterly or yearly and not in the full cycle of time, as in many indigenous cultures, you know, have a long-term cycle, and that cycle is connected to the earth, to Mother Earth and its rotations. If we're just have clock time, as Heidegger puts it, and we don't have a time that's grounded in the earth, then we're in trouble. Economists persuade politicians and non-governmental organizations, NGOs, can pick up the pieces after globalization does its greed thing. So you have hundreds, thousands, NGOs running around. We just had a major NGO with a sex scandal in their own administrative order, and with the people they're trying to help. I won't even say which one it is, because I'm glad people are giving money to them and doing something. But I have a quick story. I was working with a man from Peru, tribal leader from the mountains in Peru, and the tribe, very little contact with Western culture, but some, and the some has been a problem. So what he told me is the NGOs come to the tribe and they say, oh, we're going to put you on the micro-loan program. We're going to set up internet for you, and you can get a loan, you can do your banking online, your kids can now learn from the internet, and life is going to be really good in the village. His answer was, we have no electricity. We have no cell phones because we have no electricity. Now, I guess you could get solar panels, whatever. But he said, can you help us with the battery problem? What's the battery problem? We don't do batteries, we do microloans. Have you ever noticed that about globalization? They got their own little kit of tools and solutions, but they don't do what you really need them to do. I'm seeing nods in the audience. And so he said, well, the battery problem, well, the kids, you ever do this when you're a kid? Admit it. I bet you did this. Took a battery, you're about 4 years old, and just lift the end, get a little charge. You did that? See, I did that. Well, if you do that enough, you can get sick. And people are throwing the batteries away into the creek, which goes into the lake, which polluted the water. Now the water's bad. Then they say to the NGO, can you do something about that? No, we have a program for microloans. That will help you. The Google will help you, and you can learn about batteries. you know, and how to dispose of them properly. You know what I mean? So each NGO has their little hammer, but are they really doing a needs assessment? That's my point. Okay, so for Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, you say Ardern, right?
Yes.
Ardern. I wish we had a young president that was concerned about climate change and quality of life and well-being in my country. Trump, if you're listening, I didn't vote for you. Now this is my little boat in the sea of New Zealand, floating around. And over here, it tips here, and economists are worried that they're going to lose profit and GDP. Whoopee. Over here, it tips a little bit. People are worried they're going to fall in. Not enough room in the lifeboat. And then we got the planet ecology. What I want to do is the fourth dimension here is for caring in advance for probable extinction events. Like actually planning for the ecology and the people. That's what I mean by that. And it's doing what's called resilience planning. I sat in a resilience team meeting and they informed me that there's such a thing as resilience planning. I go, okay, I'll give up sustainability, which seems to be greenwash, and I'll do resilience planning. So for caring is a concept I work with, and it means for caring in advance for something. I get it from Heidegger's work. If you're parents and you're going to have a little child, you're going to have a baby, you don't just plop the baby in a room. You do your exercise, you go to classes, you have the right nutrition, you stop drinking. I guess the men keep drinking, but the women can't drink anymore. You stop smoking, you prepare a special room. It has the color. If you do ultrasound, it has the blue or the pink or whatever colors are in, something to keep the kid intelligent as they're in the crib. And then you plan in advance for this child. You care for the child, for caring. You care in advance for the child, and you prepare in advance for this. This is what corporations, countries could be doing, is preparing in advance, so we're not going to have some of these. Obviously, if an asteroid hits us, there's not a lot we can do. But famine, water shortage, the viral outbreak, neoliberalism is something we can do something about. Neoliberalism, I am astonished I come from the management discipline, and it's completely overtaken the teaching of management. It's management culture in the management discipline, the management academy, the academy management, the AACSB, the accrediting agencies are all about neoliberal economics. It's all about bottom line profit, bottom line efficiency. We had all this mumbo jumbo about stakeholders were important, but it's not about stakeholders, it's about shareholders. And we're paying these managers exorbitant amounts of money to become CEOs. Every student in my class could care less about people or planet. They just want to be a billionaire. I say, okay, what's the probability you're going to become a billionaire in New Mexico? You're in the poorest state in the country. You have the worst education system, K through 12. Your graduation rates from college are 46 and 48%. Good luck with that, you know? And by the way, we don't need another billionaire. We need less of them. Okay, that's my pitch. And this is what I want you to do. Celebrate Tyrone Love, Dr. Love, and his grandfather. And his auntie, Auntie Love, sorry, also a doctor. I'm the only doctor in my family, so very good. First one to go to college, by the way. Further, many firms, this is a quote from Dr. Love, many firms that would apparently benefit from reporting large, listed, high-impact, and visible companies do not report. In other words, we have corporate social responsibility, we have sustainability reporting, but not by everybody. And if you look at what they're reporting, they're leaving out many of the important things that they could be reporting about their CO2 production, their footprint on the planet, right? Their responsibility for water pollution. We could be holding them accountable. So I just think it's a wonderful thing. Give them a hand. You did a great job. I didn't have you come up this time. I was gentle. So what we want to do is we want you to write a letter to Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. There's her email. And we're actually going to fly up some presents from the University of Canterbury. We hope you join in, take it over to the Beehive, and give her some ideas, some quality ideas on how to actually turn this into something that's useful. So we can easily deconstruct and toss out the triple bottom line. It's really bogus. This integrated reporting, we can just make fun of it. But what can we actually do with a prime minister that cares about some of these issues? Can she do something to make a difference in the world? That's my question. Okay, I'm done. Thank you. Now, what did you define sustainability to be? What kinds of things did you come up with? What's important? What questions can I answer? Are you willing to sign on to a letter? Do you think there's hope? There's love in the world? What? I'll just wait for the answers. Okay, I have to call on you. No. So what questions do you have? Okay, so I was so thoroughly prepared and awesome. Do you have no questions or what? Yes, ma'am. Katie.
It's really, there's some work in the accounting literature that looks at how integrating indigenous ways of knowing may enhance corporate social responsibility or accountability. Some work, not a lot, but how do you, I guess, if you're going to integrate those kinds of principles, how do you convince people who aren't, like, you know, like it's, I guess, how do you make it seem legitimate in relation to
No, it's a very good question. Well, the work you're doing in counter accounting, counter accounts, and working with indigenous peoples to create their own accounting for what's important to them. We don't have to use the standard accounting practices, We can develop other practices that are better, would be. And I want those articles. You have to send them to me. I'd appreciate it. The other thing, if we have a better understanding of indigenous philosophies, we can learn from them to produce counter accounts. Is that right? Did I say it right? Counter accounting? All right. So we can have a contrary counter accounting to the dominant paradigm of accounting and do something really substantive. That's possible.
Do you think corporations would take those counter accounts as seriously as their own, though?
Not initially. If you look at the coalition of Immokalee workers, the growers initially said we will fine any grower in the state of Florida that uses Immokalee workers $100,000. So a lot of most growers, all growers, for years didn't have anything to do with it. But then one grower said, I'm interested in what's going on in the field. I've heard these claims about rape and sexual harassment and that people are not getting paid and the tubs of tomatoes are being overfilled and there's really some things going on. He came and looked for himself and he said, you know what? This is a good idea. Fair food program is a good idea, and if we can clean this up, we should do it. One grower broke ranks, and then the other growers broke ranks. Then you had to deal with the multinational companies. So they went after Taco Bell. They just said, okay, we'll start demonstrating on Taco Bell. You got 6,000 immigrants show up at your Taco Bell, Taco Bell headquarters. We marched on Wendy's. in their Ohio headquarters. The students at Ohio State University, many of them were fasting, you know, in sympathy with the migrant workers. I was there as a faculty. The faith groups were all there, from the Jewish, the Christians, the Presbyterians, the Protestants, the Buddhists. They were all there, you know, forming alliance. And it broke through in Taco Bell, then McDonald's, and then Subway, then Walmart, and then, you know, now Wendy's is the last holdout. But they won't listen right away, and you have to network and you have to bring it to their attention. But once they find out, hey, it's actually better publicity, we don't have to pay coyotes, we're not exploiting workers, we give them a little water, a little shade, they actually work a little harder. What's the problem? What's the problem? Because you don't get to do your white master thing and the master slave thing anymore? Is that the problem? Wendy's? You know? Get over it, you know? So I think corporations have to be persuaded of centuries of history of managing the bottom line. We're training people in the Wharton Business School, the Harvard Business School in the United States to punch that short bottom line. People in the United States are working a lot of hours. Those kids are going to those universities thinking they're going to have a good career, and they're working 40, 60, 80-hour weeks till they drop to get that chance at the billion-dollar ticket, you know? But we have to be straight with these kids, what's going on that are in our classrooms. Stop lying to them about Horatio Alger myth you're going to make $1 million, as if that's the only thing in life that's important. Anyway, so I think corporations can be persuaded, but we have to be an accounting community, and a management community, and a marketing community, an economics community that says, no, we don't believe your report, go do it again, C-. You know? Do that a few times and see what happens.
And next week there'd be a lot more room for people in critical management, critical accounting, and the heterodox economists to get together, wouldn't it?
There would be awesome room. You know, mall is beautiful. Manage to the right scale for your environment. Don't overdo things, you know. Housing in the United States has doubled in size, the square foot of housing, since the 1970s. Now people have to rent space. They have double the size of the housing, got double garages, their garage is full, their house is full, they got to be more consumption, and then they got to rent warehouse space for the extra consumption. No, minimalize, drop it down, scale that thing way back, you know? It could happen. You know, our consumption lifestyles affect the planet. You know, I read it in your New Zealand newspaper that climate change is changing what's happening in the Alps. You call them the Alps, did I get that right? In New Zealand, it's affecting the rivers. It's affecting. Oh, did you hear what's happening to rivers now? I met a New Zealand lawyer in the law school, and she's doing tremendous work. They're declaring rivers as people, as persons. And the river as persons mean the river has rights to exist. The river is a living body of water and it has a right to exist on the planet. You know what they do to the Rio Grande in New Mexico? They shut it down in the winter. You know? You're shutting off the fish, the wildlife, the plant life. Why? That river has a right to exist. Yes, sir.
In that context, and in the context of New Zealand in particular, has anybody suggested to you Anne Salmon's book, Tears of Rangi?
Yes, I have heard that one. I'm going to get it.
It's absolutely must read. But
Anne Salmon's The Tears of Rainy.
Tears of Rangi, it's called, isn't it?
Tears
So,
of Rainy.
apart from anything else, she kind of talks about, well, principally really, she talks about the competing ontologies.
Let's keep them in the picture.
So she talks about in New Zealand's history, really, right from 600 odd years ago in the early settlement. It's been a process of competing ontologies.
My favorite word.
Well, it's a good word, isn't it?
Yeah, they don't teach it in college.
No.
Not
No,
in the
possibly
business
not.
school. You never hear that.
But as a New Zealand example, in terms of Katie's questioning, how do we actually get people to pay attention? In a very small scale, we've had a very successful example of that recently in New Zealand, where a reasonably sized and very successful winery, who had got some basically owned a piece of land that also had significant spiritual value to the local iwi,
Yeah.
decided to build a bicycle track down this land, a mountain, and with disastrous effects in terms of, it was like a scar. And initially they kind of said, well, we can earn a lot of money from this bike track, people will come and enjoy it, blah, blah, blah. But the outcry was enough for them to back down and actually reinstate the land.
Huh?
So, there are small local examples where it can work, and perhaps it's occurring on a more frequent scale.
Oh, yeah. I gave the example earlier, the tobacco industry, when I grew up, everybody was smoking in bars.
Yes.
Then the tobacco company wanted a bigger market share, so they started putting out more advertisements for women to smoke. And they were doing that. What did we hear the other day? The PR firms were sending women down the street in New York saying, "Freedom is smoking. Freedom is smoking.
Really?
Women should smoke for freedom." And it was just a PR gag to get women smoking. But now when cases of cancer are documented and they had to pay their fines, nobody smokes anymore in restaurants. They don't smoke in bars. I went to London and it's smoke free in the pub, It's completely different in just a few years. I mean, if we hold corporations accountable for their behavior, they change, Hit them where the money is.
There is a lovely quote in, and I can't think of the book, but about can accountants change the world? The idea that economists really have not been very successful. The military can't stop climate change. The governments certainly have had no impact, but just maybe accountants can change the world.
Accountants can change the world. I want that on your T-shirts, tattooed on your arm, on your leg, wherever you want to put it. I don't want to dictate, But yeah, accountants could change the world. What do you think, sir?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, very good. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Professor Boji.
Dr. Love.
Yes.
Dr. Love, what is your opinion?
Professor Boji, I
Yes.
would like to firstly just thank you because for a very refreshing, stimulating, and actually exciting presentation.
Wow, I'm so happy. Thank you.
Well, I haven't finished.
Oh, no,
but-
now it comes the other side. Oh, wait, I've run out of film. Okay, go ahead.
No, I think a couple of things. Firstly, one of the problems is I'm not a business studies person.
Good.
However, I have worked in Maori businesses for 3 to 4 decades. Maori organisations in various forms. One of the struggles that we have as Maori organisations is actually some of the people who come out of business studies training. People who come out with management, maybe accounting, different sorts of university degrees, and maybe can throw in a few Māori words or speak a bit of Māori, but the thinking is still very much being schooled by the dominant Western business paradigms, I guess. And my background is in psychology, and one of the things that we did when I was on the New Zealand Psychologist Board is we did a national study of Māori perceptions of psychology. And we found that in Māori communities across the country there were very negative perceptions of psychology, with people saying repeatedly they don't understand how the Māori mind works. They don't. And so the proposed solution, which was to train more Māori psychologists, was also not accepted by our people. because they said when our people, particularly our young Māori people, go and do the psychology training, they come out, their thinking has changed, and they can't find their way home. So the point I guess I'm trying to make is I believe we need to actually embrace a lot more practically and meaningfully Indigenous rooted and grounded models, whether it's in psychology, whether it's in business, and learn from them. Because the difficulty is if they're just tacked on as a little bit on the side, a few words or whatever, the effect can actually be quite negative. Yeah? And so that's one of the problems that we're having, I guess, in our organisation sometimes, is that young people who've gone through this university training without having a really good grounding in our, I don't know if you'd say ontology, epistemology, Māori, kaupapa Māori, mā tauranga Māori, don't get it because their minds are dominated by this way of thinking. So that's just one comment, but I really appreciate what you're presenting, and I tautoko, you need to learn that word, say it.
Totoro?
Tautoko, perfect.
Everybody.
Tautoko.
Tokoro. Very good.
Tautoko.
Totoko.
Yeah.
All right.
Tautoko, or absolutely support the kaupapa or the cause that you've presented here.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I appreciate your comment. Thank you very much.
I think on that subject, if
Yes,
I
please.
just carry on. Can I just say that there could be an argument that this works as a philosophy, but some of our biggest corporations in New Zealand are owned by Indigenous interests, Ngāi Tahu, for example, forestry, farming, property, and there is no evidence that those corporations are any more socially responsible, focused on sustainability than their non-Indigenous owned corporations. And it would seem to me that there's some work to be done. There may be some research to be done to see whether some of those values come through, because if that were the case, you'd see Ngāi Tahu Holdings, and have a look at their accounts.
Will do.
You see the size of it, scale of it. Maybe they could take a lead in terms of triple bottom line reporting and reporting in a different way. I haven't seen evidence of that, but it's a real opportunity. But all I'm saying is that fine as a philosophy, but in the areas where the Indigenous interests are actually the owners of these corporations, there's no evidence that I know of that there's any more greater focus on social responsibility, which is a shame, I think, because it's a real opportunity.
Let me speak to that and we'll get to it. There's some researchers, I think it's Benton and Benton, a husband and wife team, about 2001 in New Zealand, put out a book that the Maori language was being forgotten by the Maori. So if you don't have the language, the four concepts of the philosophy are also being forgotten. So it's not a surprise that you could have a significant number of Maori businesses that are not operating to the philosophy.
Which is one point.
Yes,
Yeah,
and we're going to take a comment in the back from Dr. Love, our elder.
I'm recognising the time. I just wanted to say a few words to you, sir.
Yes, sir.
E ngā rangatira o ngā hauawha, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Which means simply, you are an important person who has come from afar to talk to us, and so your message is well.